Well, Alexandria, welcome to the podcast. Today on our real estate podcast, we're going to be talking about insurance, how much coverage is adequate, what happens when you need to file a claim, and a couple of other details like what if you're underinsured, what happens in a scenario like that, how do you even know, and we'll get rolling from there.
Awesome. My name's Alexandria. I work over at Farmers Insurance with Jared Boucher. I have been in insurance for about 3 years now. I am more passionate than I think people would expect, and I have a reason why, and I love to share that and just at least share my knowledge out there.
That's kind of what it's all about here, is sharing knowledge that we work on our day jobs every day, and the people that we help probably do this maybe once a year at the most in insurance worlds. And in my world, maybe every 5 years.
Right.
So it's really fun for us to share the stuff that we, learn every day out to the people that might need to actually know it.
Right. There's a reason you're in your job and a reason I'm in mine. So
yeah, they're definitely two different fields. And it's just, there's a lot that goes into kind of some of these key details that it's like too much to explain to somebody at the time, like let's call it point of sale.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel really pushy, like, okay, sit down. I'm going to explain to you how a mortgage goes from start to finish. It's going to be a 45-minute conversation if you really wanted to know all those details. So I kind of rely on this podcast. Maybe if people want to know more, I'll refer them to my podcast. Or maybe they'll see it along the way and then might not have as many questions or feel more prepared with what questions they do want to ask me once we do interact. So
yeah, and I think that goes anywhere from the beginning, like you said at the start of the sale, to I have customers who, had a mortgage for 30, 40 years and still have no idea what they should be doing. So I think it's good at any point in your life to be educated on all of this.
Well, and they don't need to necessarily know everything, but to be familiar with it and to know whether or not they can trust our instincts, trust our professionalism and expertise, which, we showcase here. And if it's a fit, it's a fit. And we love to work with whoever's watching. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, tell me some of the things that have led you into the insurance field, and why you're so passionate about that in the first place. And then we'll kind of talk about how to figure out what insurance is adequate when you're getting into a home.
Yeah. I was one of those young people that when I bought my house, all the process happened so quickly that I was just told, you need home insurance, figure it out. And I had maybe 12 hours. A year and a half into owning my home, I had no idea who through my homeowner's insurance was through, and that's terrible to admit. But it's the reality, especially as a young homeowner. So I think something that's really important to me is educating those younger people, and that it is a quick process, but you need to find somebody that you can trust.
Typically, in my experience, your customers aren't going to have all their questions up front. They're going to want to come back to you and say, hey, can I text you later? Or if something comes up, can we get into a conversation? And that might be after business hours in some cases, which we would say is kind of a service requirement of the modern era, is you have to be available, kind of well into the evenings. And I think most of us found that out when work from home happened during COVID years. And we're all emailing each other at 10 p.m. Like, what is going on?
But being available like that is one of those services that you can offer to your clients that I think is important on both sides. Being upfront with my customers is something I appreciate. So if they need me at 10 p.m. to know what their coverage is, I'd rather them have the confidence knowing that they can reach out to me than just some 800 number.
Well, and I would say we talk a lot on this podcast about the importance of being local. And so I think those kind of service hours are a local thing. Wherever you live, a local person is going to be more willing to work later, just like you said, versus calling into a call center. Those guys show up to the call center and then they don't work off of their personal cell phones ever.
Right.
Whereas we do. And so that's a pretty big difference.
And especially I think both of us as parents realize once 5 o'clock hits, that's realistically your free time. None of us have time in the day to take time out of our busy work schedules. And so I think that's another part of being flexible in our jobs, is realizing these people are not willing to answer the phone during, or they maybe don't have the time, and really working with their schedules and what they need. So that's why we always try to keep appointments open on the weekend, or just to be available when we can, meet you where we can, whether that's at home, coffee shop, the new home, wherever it may be, just kind of being flexible. That's been the new reality, I think, of insurance.
Yeah. And so speaking of flexibility, when it goes to getting a mortgage and figuring out how much home insurance you need, there's not much flexibility there.
Right.
You pretty much have two options. So you can insure it for what the sales price is, or the appraised value, which is going to be probably more than what you actually need. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, in the event of an insurance claim, you're not really repairing the ground ever.
Exactly.
You're just repairing the home itself. So
exactly.
And the value of the home, when you buy it, you're buying land and home. So you're paying a price for both, whereas you're only really insuring one.
Correct. And I think that's a big misconception that I have to go through with my clients. But once they understand the difference between those two things, it's a lot easier to insure the house.
And so that's something called a replacement cost estimator, or a replacement cost estimate can be done. And not every insurance company actually does those. So I've worked with insurance. I've had customers say, "Hey, here's my insurance. I got my quote for homeowners, and it's for $350K, and they're buying a house for $500. Okay, that sounds about right. Can you forward the RCE? Oh, what the heck is that? Oh, it's this replacement cost estimator, and your insurance person will know exactly what it is. Just ask them for it and send it. Oh, they don't have that. And they find out. And it's like, well, okay, how do they determine what value that is even?
Yeah.
Like, we need some kind of a report. That's why we do appraisals in our business, to see what is the home worth and what are we going to lend on that, and so on and so forth. So replacement cost estimator is a big deal. And I think if you don't even know what that is, to know that some companies have it and don't have it is like a little bit, that was a little mind blowing for me. Like, how does some companies not even have that?
It's a little crazy to me that somebody can say what something is worth without having any kind of information on it, right? You don't get jewelry appraised and not bring the ring with you. Just makes sense. I think another part of that is, like you were saying, you can buy a house for maybe $500,000, but you're only insuring it for $350,000. So that's another big conception that, or misconception, that a lot of people think, I bought the house for $500,000, I need $500,000 in coverage, which is not true. I mean, you have to know in today's industry, the cost of a house 3 years ago versus now is going to be significantly different. And so all the things that we take into account with the reconstruction estimator is going to be how many bedrooms you have, what does your foundation look like, what does your attic look like. It's really going to be how much is this going to cost to rebuild. So meaning, if I go to Lowe's and I have to rebuild my whole house and I need the lumber and the nails, that's really what your insurance company is looking at. And then, of course, you have all your extra stuff like your personal property and anything, your pictures and your pots and pans. But really, I hope that your insurance agent does you the due diligence of going through each room in your home, because there's improvements that a lot of people make and they don't mention. If you've updated your bathroom, please give your insurance agent a call, because that's going to make a huge difference on your reconstruction estimator. People don't think putting brand new granite tile in, they don't think to call their insurance agent. But if your house burned down, wouldn't you want that granite tile to be replaced? You just spent all that money on it. So always give your insurance agent a call. And even if it's something that you may not think is major, it's going to be a big difference for you whenever it comes to being covered.
So you want to make sure that you're covered, not just your purchase price, but then incorporate all the updates that you might make to really make that home your own.
Exactly.
Then you want to make sure because that's the beauty of homeownership. You can make all these changes, really dial in your space to be yours. If your garage needs to be a studio or a workout room or something, you can do that.
Right.
Which in the apartment world, it's pretty much minor changes are okay. Maybe you can paint if you get lucky, but you're not really having the same flexibility that you do in a home.
And that's the big difference between renter's insurance and your home insurance. Your renter's just covers your contents, and that's why it's so affordable or cheap in some people's idea, whereas home insurance is really meant to protect all that money that you're putting into that. So even something as simple as replacing hardwood floors, even if they're those clicked tiles that might seem cheap to you, you'd be surprised of how much that's going to increase your home value.
Okay, so basically from there, the next question that pops up in my mind is, are you going to go through each room and insure your contents, like you said? So if you have a nice stereo, a nice TV, and jewelry, when are those included in a home policy versus like maybe some kind of separate insurance policy?
For your personal contents, what I usually tell people is to take your house, turn it upside down, shake all your stuff out. What would that look like to you? Which is a lot more than people expect. So for example, your TVs, your pots and pans, your picture frames, all of those are going to be normal things that people have. Some people have wedding rings, or they might have a gun collection, or things that they might hold near and dear to their heart, which is kind of where we get into the floaters articles. That's going to offer you more specific coverage for what you need.
Okay, so floaters insurance, that's not something I'm familiar with. Do you want to touch on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, so a floater will actually add some more specific coverage to your homeowner's insurance. So let's say your husband has bought you this beautiful $10,000 ring. obviously you'd be pretty upset if that was stolen out of your house, right? So with a floater, what usually insurance does is you go and you get your appraisal, you bring it back to us as the insurance company, and we'll add a floater onto your policy. Usually there's a certain amount that you will be covered for if for some reason you didn't get that appraisal. So let's say you have a $10,000 ring, you're only covered for $2,500 up into your jewelry. Adding on that floater is going to cover the rest of that $7,500 that you need.
I see.
And a lot of people don't think about that. And it does not have to be anything elaborate. I'm talking, maybe it's one gun that you really love, or your one wedding ring that it just happens to be worth more than you expect. People have a lot more assets than they think they do.
Interesting. Okay, so there's different ways that you can kind of add coverages for the contents within your home. What happens in the example of this is my favorite example because it's the easiest one for me to think of. If you drive through your garage door with your car. So you're going to have your auto policy and your home policy. Those maybe overlap in some cases.
Exactly. So the unfortunate part with this is that you've now created damage to your house and your car. Those are going to be two separate policies, right? So in this instance, I think something that we should first look at is it worth filing a claim? The secondary part that I think we need to look at is you now have two claims. So you have your car, which is going to be your comprehensive for the damages you've caused. And now you're going to have to file a homeowner's claim to fix the garage, right? So something I'd really like to stress to consumers or customers is to really evaluate the damage yourself. So if it's your garage door that you just crashed into, I really encourage you to go to your local garage installer and get a quote and an estimate for that, because it makes no sense if a brand new garage door is $1,500, but your home deductible is $2,500. Why pay more and then also put that home claim on yourself? So both deductibles would apply, but I really encourage customers to go out and get an estimate before they look at filing a claim.
I do have another example where a customer of mine had a tree fall on his home. This is up in Carnation, Washington. And he had to file a claim to get his house prepared, of course, and it did a ton of damage and it was all covered, which is great. This was a real true emergency. And his premiums did get pretty expensive after filing that claim. So that's just something to be aware of, that insurance is there to protect you in an emergency, but there is still a cost associated with filing that claim. So when it comes to homeownership, you want to make sure that you do have a savings account to still weather the storm of premiums changing. Not that you're going to be responsible for an $85,000 repair to your house from a tree smashing through it, but you might have your premiums go up, a little, several $100s per month, or maybe a little bit more in some cases. So that's where I stress getting to the homeowner, getting into a home. Don't spend every single last penny you have. You want to make sure that you are ready to weather the storms, literally and figuratively.
It's true. Insurance is meant to be there for something catastrophic. It's not meant to be there for, just a tiny, gosh, I don't even know what I would compare. Something minor. It's really meant to be there for a catastrophe.
It's not there for the neighbor kid throwing a baseball through the window.
Exactly. Yeah. We're talking the tree falling down. We're talking a new addition. And so it's your neighbor's tree and that you notice that the tree is rotting. So in your mind, you want to take care of this as soon as you can. You need to go to your neighbor and in written form say, hey, we have this tree in our backyards. It's overlapping. I think it's something we need to take care of. Let's say your neighbor says, nope, not my problem. I'm not taking care of it. That then shows their negligence, right? So let's say the tree finally falls and it hits your house. That is not an act of God. That was your neighbor being negligent. At that point, that's whenever it would kick over to their home insurance, most likely. So something to be aware of. If you see your neighbors with, their trees hanging over, or they have a bunch of cars in their front yard, it's really something to be aware of and try to be proactive because it can affect you also.
So go one step further when you're getting your home insurance and look at the areas surrounding your home, not just your immediate parcel.
Exactly. So if, say, you're looking at a home to buy, I highly recommend, if the previous owner is, really good with the neighbors, hey, I noticed this tree is overhanging our fence. Is there any way maybe we could take care of that before the closing? It's super simple to do.
It's easy to ask, at least.
Exactly. What's the worst they're going to say? Yeah. No. And then you cut it down when you get there.
That's right.
Exactly.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so when the problem actually occurs, So let's say you have, and I kind of keep shifting my example, which maybe isn't so fair, but let's move to the example of a break-in.
Yeah.
Obviously, probably you want to call 911 first, or police, or first responders if you need to. But who would you call first? Like if you have a giant leak, do you need to call your insurance before you call the plumber? The break-in example, I think, is self-explanatory. I just wanted to put that out there as kind of like
Yeah.
a disclaimer. But like in the example of a big leak, growing up, we came home one time from like a baseball game or something, a sports game as kids, and the kitchen was flooded. The hose to the washer broke,
Yep.
which was kind of attached to the kitchen, flooded. It was a second story, hardwood floors, and so it was a big deal.
Yeah.
But I can't remember in that case because I was a kid. So who would you call first? Your insurance person to say, hey, do I have to call an approved plumber, or do you just call your emergency fix person right away because you're in the heat of the moment and you're all worried about you. So would you need to call your insurance before getting your damage repaired?
If you have an agent this is where I think it's really important to have that local agent when we're going back to texting at 10 p.m. So if something like that does happen, I really think the first thing should be calling your insurance agent and saying, I have this emergency on my hands. Is this something that's going to be covered, or should I look at maybe getting my own quote? Either way, I recommend getting your own quote to make sure that you're getting a fair price, because we are going to pay out a certain price for that. Long story short, though, I would make sure you call your insurance agent just to be sure what is on your coverages. There's also a lot of extra coverages. For example, usually home insurance only covers any kind of flooding that's inside the house, but there's also extra coverages that your insurance agent can go over with you on, and that is going to be like your lines and maybe some utilities. So there's a lot more that I think your agent should be able to go over with, because there's a lot of different types of catastrophes that could be covered under different parts of your policy, and you may not even know that it's not covered.
So if you have a situation occur, don't just think, hey, I have insurance, I'm going to just take care of it and get it fixed. Get your insurance agent involved and say, hey, what am I doing here? Help guide me through this a little bit.
100%. I have a septic at my house, and when it went awry, in my mind, of course, I thought that's part of the house. Of course, it's covered. In all reality, there sometimes is an endorsement that we need to add onto a policy in order for anything that isn't inside of the house to be covered. So always something to double check.
Great information.
And I think another thing people don't think about is that your home is actually one of the biggest liabilities that you actually have. If you think about it, that's the biggest bill that you probably have every month, right? But at the same time, you're having to do all of this upkeep on top of that. But it's also not making you any money at the same time, right? So I think with real estate, that's where we could bring in, you need something that makes you money. And at the same time, while you're doing your home insurance, if your insurance agent mentions to you any kind of financial planning, whether that be life insurance or your retirement, even if you don't have the time at closing to go over that, I highly recommend coming back to that conversation. A lot of people don't know that life insurance isn't just for death benefits, that there are living benefits to it. Especially with a permanent policy, you have that tax deferred that you can pull out. So let's say something crazy with the septic does happen, it's not covered. Now we have that life insurance policy that we could probably take some money out of. And that can be for any instance, honestly. So I always recommend to people looking at a full package of insurance, everything from bundling your home and your auto, that's the bread and butter, but really having an agent to look out. When you buy that house, you have a whole family. So if you were to pass away, could your family afford to pay the mortgage? Probably not. Most of the time you qualify with two incomes. Am I wrong?
Yeah, typically.
Yeah.
So that's something to encourage, just like with the mortgage strategy. You really want to talk about the whole scenario, all your
Right.
bills. In some cases, a person can pay off some of their credit. Say it's like a $2,000 bill.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, if you pay off this $2,000 bill, your credit score might go up
That's genius.
just in this little tiny bracket. And then now you get a better interest rate. So let's look at the whole picture. Same thing for an insurance strategy. Let's look at your whole picture of what you have. And if there's any gaps, how can we cover them with a floater or with maybe a life insurance policy that can fill other gaps that might not be covered?
Exactly. I think you hear so much about the wealthier, like the better off having these life insurance policies, and nobody talks about the fact of why. It's because it's kind of a backup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great information. So if people wanted to learn a little bit more about insurance, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The nice part is that in 2023, you can always text our agency. The best way, I love when my customers come to visit me. Please come and give me a hug. So we are going to be located off of Pacific Avenue in Olympia. The other way, like I said, I'm young, always on my phone and texting. I love a phone call. So if you want to reach me, phone number is going to be 360-339-4708.
Great. And then anybody that's watching this on LinkedIn or Facebook can just send a direct message and contact us within the platform.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm super excited to help anything, even if it's just a review. I think it's always good to get in touch with any insurance agent.
I've found that as well too. Getting a second opinion is always worthwhile. I have several people that I wish I would do their business, but maybe they already have a quote. They're working with someone and they just want another professional to check it out and make sure there's nothing crazy in there. And that's always worth our time as well. Just to network and help and be of value and service.
Exactly. And share our knowledge.
That's right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
excited
you for having
to maybe
me.
do another one here in the future, and we'll see you soon.
Most definitely. Thank
All
you.
right, take care.